Rabbi Gideon Black, how are you?
I'm great, thank God. How are you, Rabbi Golker?
Great to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are on with a lifelong friend of mine, Rabbi Gideon Black. Gideon lives in New York. We grew up together, we were in school together, we were even in camp together. And Gideon, let me introduce you to him. He is certainly an up-and-coming leader of the Jewish people, a role model to so many. Gideon is currently the Director of Professional Recruitment and Leadership Development for the OU, the JLIC, previously having served as Rabbi of New York University, is that correct? Fantastic. And Gideon studied law at UCL, gained his smicha at YU, and has subsequently done a master's in Jewish philosophy, and recently completed Developing Leaders program at Columbia Business School. So Gideon, it's wonderful to see you from Englewood, New Jersey. How are you doing?
I'm okay, thank God. Thank you so much for inviting me. You've had such an illustrious lineup of interviewees, and I'm honored to be included in the mix. And it's also just been special for me. I moved to the States in 2007. So I'm in my 13th year here, but one thing that's given me a lot of pride over the last years is as I've just sort of watched from a distance your role in Anglo Jewry grow, and the amount of teaching and rabbinic leadership that you've done is incredible. And you know, and always with your trademark smile and joie de vivre. And you know, it's funny when we think back to our days in school, as Hasmo boys, you never know who's going to go on to great things and be a billionaire, and who's going to be a leader of the Jewish people, and who's going to end up in jail. And you know, I'm sure we have all of the above from our class, but you know, we're not surprised that you've done so well and
thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you. First of all, can I ask, how is Eliza doing? How are the kids? Mazel tov on your recent new baby.
Thank you.
It must be a challenge having a newborn in lockdown, and generally living in the New York area, which has very much been the epicenter of COVID-19. How's life going for you and for your community, for everyone over there in the States?
Yeah, thank God we were blessed with a baby just before coronavirus swept into America, and so we were lucky in that we had the baby at a sort of a time of calm, and where people weren't really as aware of what was about to affect the community. And thank God the baby's great. The rest of our kids are nuts, completely bonkers at home. And I'm hoping that our few minutes together remains uninterrupted, but I apologize in advance if people come crashing in. But yeah, it's been a really tense time here. You know, we live in the suburbs, so in Manhattan, people are hearing sirens all the time. There are many hospitals dotted throughout Manhattan, so the experience of just constantly hearing sirens and knowing people are being rushed to hospital in you know, needing critical care is very hard for those even who are just living around that, let alone obviously for those who are impacted directly, whose health is being impacted. But even for us, where we would never hear a siren on our street, you know, number of times a day you hear ambulances on the main road. And you know, there's Bergen County, where the larger county where Englewood is within, has been the hotspot within the state of New Jersey. So being over the bridge from Manhattan and being in the epicenter in New Jersey, you certainly feel the loss and the trauma that's going on. And you know, unfortunately, there've been losses in the community, but everyone at home's okay, thank God.
We should hear Besorat Tovat. We should hear any good news. Now, normally my interviews are focused with members of St. John's Wood Synagogue or people connected with our community. And the last time you were probably in St. John's Wood was Gaby Weiss's bar mitzvah, probably in the summer of 1996. And people are wondering, why am I interviewing you? So the reason is because today is Yom Hazikaron, and the day of remembrance, where we remember all the victims of terror, all those people in the Israeli Defense Force who've given up so much and sacrificed so much for us to be able to have the state of Israel. Now Gideon has a very personal story to share with regards to his cousin Yoni Jesner, Shalom, of blessed memory. And I'd like to share with you all a very short clip just to contextualize why we are interviewing Gideon today. So almost half of your life has now passed since that terrible day, September 19th, 2002. Perhaps you could share with people watching this your recollections of that day, and also a little bit about Yoni himself.
Sure. So maybe I'll start just with a bit about Yoni, just to give you a sense of the person, of the loss. You know, when we try and think about remembering 23,000 plus people, the number is so vast. So just accessing one story can help make it feel more personal. Yoni was, as you mentioned, he was 19 when he died, but he accomplished a tremendous amount in his short time. The main thing that strikes me when I think back is his sweetness, is his joy. Yoni was tremendously intelligent, and he had a place actually to study medicine at UCL after our time in Yeshiva in Israel. And he was always a straight A student, and he was very, very accomplished in many disciplines. He was top of his class at school, and picked up taekwondo and playing guitar, and anything he put his mind to, he would excel at. Even arriving at yeshivas, some coming from not a Jewish school, he quickly excelled and became one of the top students in yeshiva. But despite his prodigious talent, he was just joyful. He was funny. He was a prankster. He loved to make jokes, and he used humor as a way of people of allowing people to see the good in themselves, of sort of leveling the playing field. Although he was a very serious person, he didn't take himself seriously at all. And that was a tremendous motif of chesed, I think, that sort of ran through his whole being, and the way he lived his life, just allowing people to feel comfortable in their own skin, allowing people to enjoy the moments they were with him, because he was so comfortable in his own skin.
Tell us your recollections of that fateful, terrible day.
So we were in Jerusalem at the time. Yeshiva in Alon Shvut, which is just 20 minutes outside of Jerusalem, had closed for the Sukkot break, and we'd been in Jerusalem, and we were traveling to Tel Aviv that day. That was the plan of the day, to head to Tel Aviv the day before Sukkot, to spend Sukkot in Tel Aviv with my family. Yoni and I, though I grew up in London and Yoni grew up in Glasgow, where my family is from, we always spent the Chagim together. And so we were going to be in Tel Aviv, and we started the day actually at a shiva house. A friend of ours, a friend Yoni that we went to school with, Uri Zaltzman, had lost his father, and we went to Uri's father's shiva. It was a Thursday morning, and when it came time to read from the Torah for laning, Yoni stepped up. He'd grown up in Glasgow as one of the few people in the community able to read from the Torah without preparation, and he read the last chapters of the Torah, being Parashat V'Zot HaBracha, so it was sort of quite symbolic that on his last morning he read from the end of the Torah. And from there we made our way to Tel Aviv. We actually started off at the bus station in Jerusalem, the Tachana Merkazit. I remember we wanted to take the bus as opposed to taking a taxi to Tel Aviv, because it was, you know, living in Israel for a year or so and spending the time in an Israeli yeshiva, you wanted to act like an Israeli and not like a tourist. And it was the height of the Second Intifada. Tourism was way down, and those who did make the trip were taking certain precautions, but we felt, you know, we wanted to take the bus and be sort of tough and be real Israelis. And so we took a when we went into the bus station in Jerusalem, at the Tachana Merkazit, there's a line of taxi drivers outside the bus station, desperate for business. They see us wheeling in suitcases into the bus station. They're begging us to go with them, but we'd made up our mind. And there's this one taxi driver who was so classic Israeli. He just grabbed our suitcases without our permission and put them in the back of his boot. And he said, "You're not taking a bus to Tel Aviv. I am going to take you where you're going." And we got in the car, just too uncomfortable to tell him no. But we agreed on a price, and then he changed it, and then he said he was going to take someone else on the way. And we realized, you know what, we'd made a decision, we wanted to stick with it. And so we thanked him, took our suitcases out, and went back into the bus station. These decisions, years later, are so bizarre and heavy to think about. But we went into the Tachana Merkazit in Jerusalem, took a bus to Tel Aviv's bus station, and from there took a bus to our hotel, and that was the bus which was bombed. We were driving through Rehov Allenby in downtown Tel Aviv. It was a relatively uneventful journey. I remember just looking out the window, soaking in the atmosphere being so different, downtown central Tel Aviv compared to where we'd just been in Jerusalem and where we were coming from in Yeshiva. Yeah, those were Yoni's sort of that was his final journey.
You know, there are moments in life that you never forget. I remember so clearly, I was actually in Ben Gurion Airport going on a plane back to London for Sukkot when I got the call. All of our group of friends and everyone in the United Kingdom community were incredibly affected by that. But there was an incredible story that came out in the press days later about the way in which Yoni had gone on to save a life even after his own death. I wondered if you could share with people watching this very briefly that story.
Yeah, sure. So just not to be too graphic, but Yoni was killed by a bolt. Palestinian terrorists at the time, when they were packing suicide bombs, they would put in nuts and bolts and to try and just increase its impact. Not just the bomb itself, but shrapnel and other things that could worsen its impact. And Yoni took a hit to the head, to his brainstem really, with a bolt that had been packed into the bomb. Otherwise, he was untouched. I actually was standing closer than him to the bomber, and so remarkably, it's a matter of millimeters that he was the one fatefully struck. I was injured, but lightly in comparison. And so, because I share that, because it's precisely because his injuries were so specific, that when we got to the hospital, to Ichilov Hospital in Tel Aviv, they hooked him up to a life support machine and were able to keep his vital organs, working until his parents arrived, and his siblings were able to join us in the hospital. And so, whilst he was medically dead, his parents were offered the opportunity to donate his organs. His mother and father, my aunt Marsha, and Yoni's father Joseph Jesna sought halachic consultation. They spoke to our Rosh Yeshiva and got the encouragement that under the circumstances it would be a potential mitzvah to donate Yoni's organs. And organs go to the next people on the Israeli organ donor bank. You don't have a say in who gets what. And it so happened the first person on the list was a man in his 50s in Tel Aviv who received Yoni's liver. And next person was another man from Tel Aviv, also in need of a kidney. And the third person was a young girl, Yasmin Abu Ramila, a girl from East Jerusalem. She was 8 years old, and she'd been on dialysis with kidney failure for 2.5 years, struggling. She only had months to live. And she received Yoni's other kidney. And that sort of unintended act of heroism on the part of Yoni's family in choosing to donate his organs created an international spectacle that a victim of Palestinian terror could save the life of a Palestinian girl. And just the way that the Israeli system was built, that it allowed for such thing to happen, was really a ray of hope and optimism and just a lifeline, in a sense, to try and connect to something meaningful from something so dark and terrible.
You know, I remember vividly the week after, it was Chol HaMoed Sukkot, and I phoned you. We were both kids. We were 18, 19 years old. I had no idea what to say to you. I just remember it being a very short phone call where I had so much emotion I wanted to share with you. And looking back, almost half our life has passed since that moment. Perhaps you could share with us all now, how has this pivotal moment of your life changed your life and affected you, looking back at it?
Firstly, making that call wasn't an easy thing to do. And I think we all try and avoid death and try and avoid speaking to people who are in mourning. And even us rabbis who are sort of trained to do this find it difficult. So I appreciated that. And I think, just wanted to mention that for anyone who who's suffered loss, what really means a lot to them is just that you were there, that if you can show up in person, which we can't these days, but showing up in person or making the call, no one ever thinks, oh, they stuttered through that shiva call. They just think they were there. So that act of presence meant a lot to me at the time, and is something I think about when I encounter people who are suffering loss. How's the incident impacted my life? I mean, it in a sense, it's been life affirming, to see life taken away from you right in front of your eyes. The front of the bus, there were 6 people killed in the attack. And I paused the story. The next bit of the story is that there's a guy who steps on at the next bus stop, and he's an 18-year-old boy, 17-year-old, 18-year-old boy. He's got a suicide vest strapped to him, and he's been indoctrinated with an ideology that the best thing he can do for himself and for his people is to kill himself and try and kill others at the same time. It's madness. And so the bus driver and the 4 other people who are standing at the front of the bus with him lose their lives, and Yoni, who's in the middle of the bus, standing behind me. And so I see, essentially 6 lifeless bodies in front of me, and then me and everyone at the back of the bus are spared. And I just have these images of, the people at the back of the bus, literally the glass in the bus shatters instantly. The people in the back of the bus jump out the back window, and we waited a couple of minutes until a pedestrian was able to kick down the fragments in the door and carry us off the bus, and just to look around and to see life and death before you. I think it's something maybe even, we can access a bit more that idea today when with what's happening with the coronavirus, to realize that life is fragile and special, and death is not far away from any of us. So I think that just gave me an acute sense of how blessed I am to have been spared. And it gave me a certain sense of responsibility to live well, to live for others, and to choose a career that would mean, giving to the Jewish people as much as possible. And so it was influential in my decision to go into the rabbinate. The yeshiva I was studying, Yeshiva University, I think had planted a seed about that idea before this had happened. We'd been in yeshiva for over a year at the time, but especially because it was Yoni who had been killed, and Yoni had dedicated so much of his teenage years to his community, to his shul, to Gifnock Shul in Glasgow, and to B'nai Akiva, and to the wider Scottish community, that I felt a direct responsibility that I had to help fill the vacuum. I think we all did. All of our friends and the British community rallied, and still does, in the programs that are run in Yoni's memory still to this day. We all felt a sense of responsibility to fill in the gap that can never really be filled in. But having been there right with him, being his cousin and, you know, closest friend at the time, you know, I certainly felt a sense of purpose that Hashem had spared me, and you know, with a mandate to live on Yoni's legacy.
And Yoni's legacy really does live on. The incredible work that you touched on, that his family do with the OU-JLIC Foundation, which I saw firsthand over many years at JFS, and the impact that has. And I think people watching this at home right now, especially with children, with teenagers, you want to try and give your kids that sense of responsibility, that sense of purpose, that sense of fun. And projects like the OU-JLIC Foundation, what they do in schools and young people, really does allow his legacy to live on and to continue. You know, today, Gideon, at 11 a.m., Israel will come to a standstill. And I don't think there's a family in Israel, and also in many Jewish families across the diaspora, who have not been affected either directly or indirectly through the loss of a loved one, through terror, through a pigua. And perhaps we can end on a more positive note, and you could share with people some sort of message of encouragement and positivity, especially at this time, as we say, COVID-19, where we're in a lockdown and people are suffering around us. But as the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say, tracht gut v'sein gut, think good and it will be good. Living that positive message. Have you got something positive to end on?
I'll share two thoughts. One is that after Yoni was killed, we retrieved his backpack and our suitcases from the Tel Aviv Police Department. And in Yoni's backpack were found 2 pages of notes, which were some notes he'd been keeping for himself, lessons to live by, which was quite profound for a 19-year-old. He'd written these notes sort of in his later teenage years, but they weren't messages that he'd shared publicly. It was just lessons he'd learned for himself to motivate himself towards as good conduct and behavior as he possibly could. And many people watching this may have encountered these and read them. I encourage you to go to yonijesna.org, to the foundation website, and read all 55 bullet points. But one that was particularly striking for me, which is I think the first message being that of motivation, of using our time wisely, of realizing, especially these days where we're stuck at home, and we can quite easily waste time and endlessly just try and watch TV or whatever it might be. And whilst that's fine, and I do it plenty too, to have a certain sense of focus, of motivation. Yoni writes as follows: if you find it difficult to motivate yourself to do something useful, then ask yourself the following questions. At the end of this week, what will I have accomplished? Will I have watched TV, or will I have watched my actions? Will I have changed my hairstyle, or will I have changed someone's life? Will I have shared gossip, or will I have shared knowledge? Will I have spent money on my kids, or will I have spent time with them? Those words are a ringing call for action and for purpose, and for just never letting our time be wasted, and to always live with a certain sense of purpose and motivation. And so that's given me strength over the years. And another thing, just to end on a positive note, as you sort of asked, after the attack, you know, it wasn't easy. I was blessed to be spared any acute physical and mental anguish. But I went to see a therapist, someone to give me some just guideposts to think about loss. And he, we met twice, and it was an old retired therapist, a wonderful old man. And he said to me, you know what, forget everything I said. Forget everything I said. I just want to ask you one question. Do you think Yoni wants you to be unhappy? And I said, no. He was like the happiest guy you could meet. He said, exactly. The people that we've lost, whether it's in the people that we're mourning on Yom Hazikaron, the heroes in the IDF or victims of terror, or even those in current times, those we've lost in recent days and weeks, as tragic and painful as their deaths have been, it doesn't do a service to those that we've lost for us to be miserable. Doesn't mean we're honoring their life more. It doesn't mean that we're neglecting them if we find joy in our life. Yes, we should be accepting of our pain and our grief and not deny it and not hide from it. But also to live with joy. They don't gain from our suffering. They only can be elevated by us living joyfully and with purpose. And so just to have a sense of chiyus, of living with life and with joy, I think is something, a great tribute and testament to those who we've lost.
Gideon, this has been an incredible inspiration. Thank you so much. It's joyful to be your friend. I can't wait to see you soon in person. I wish you and the family well, and enjoy your Yom Ha'atzmaut celebrations tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yoni, and all the best to you and Dina and to your family.